Hello, everyone. Welcome to Promethean Action's live question and answer show. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer here for Promethean Action, and I'm joined by Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd. Thank you very much, ladies, for joining us. So, a quick recap of what Trump has said in the last 24 hours. So, I'm just going to go through and just read a few of his posts from Truth Social, just so everyone can be on the same page and to kind of lead us in here. So here's the first one. China is very happy that I am permanently opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm doing it for them, also the world. This situation will never happen again. They have agreed not to send weapons to Iran. President Xi will give me a big fat hug when I get there in a few weeks. We are working together very smartly and very well. Doesn't that beat fighting? But remember, we are very good at fighting if we have to, far better than anyone else, President Donald J. Trump. Right, so that was released actually yesterday morning. And then last night, he shared this, which Barbara is going to talk about in just a little bit. Gabbard refers impeachment whistleblower to Department of Justice for criminal investigation and points to this article here from Just the News, John Solomon. ODNI can confirm a criminal referral was sent to the DOJ related to one or more former employees of the intelligence community and their role in the 2019 impeachment of President Trump. The Office of DNI spokesperson just told Just the News. Barbara is going to have more to say about that. And then finally, I'm going to hand it over to Susan after this one. This was posted last night, trying to get a little breathing room between Israel and Lebanon. It has been a long time since the two leaders have spoken, like 34 years. It will happen tomorrow. Nice. President Trump. And I think Marco Rubio is going to be leading up that peace delegation. Isn't that right?
Yeah. No, I think that particular post is important because what's important about it is the time frame that he's talking about. I mean, I can already hear some people's, discounting this. Oh, Israel is, still going to do terrible things. Yes. Hezbollah is still going to do terrible things. Yes. This isn't going to happen overnight. Yes, it's not going to happen overnight. But here's what's important about this post. These two leaders have not spoken for like 34 years. Now, think about what is going on with Iran. Nobody has challenged this regime and what we have called the terror premium on oil for 47 years. And take a couple of other arcs. We are now producing more steel than Japan since 1999, which is 27 years. We are now calling into question NATO for the first time in more than 60 years. You go back to the post on China. We are no longer treating China and Russia as permanent enemies for the first time in the post-war period. We're treating them as great powers where we're going to have competition and some conflict, but not as permanent enemies. So when you think of all of the things that we are now doing that we haven't done for decades, if you're a millennial, we haven't done it in your life, millennial or younger. We haven't done any of this stuff in your lifetime. So when people start to get all worked up by the psy wars on social media or just the pure understandable anxiety that in order to end an old system, you have to break a lot of things, and it's not just smooth sailing, unlike people who think, oh, well, why don't we just flip a switch and, the Federal Reserve and the globalists and all of these things are gone, or, Why don't we just tell Israel to stop doing some of these things and so on? Rather than people who live in that kind of dollhouse world, when you look at the real world and the incredible actions the president has taken, and I haven't even touched on the domestic economy, which we'll get into a little bit later. But again, just sort of step back and take account of this hasn't happened for 34 years. This hasn't happened for 47 years. This hasn't happened for 27 years. This hasn't happened for 60 years. And just ground yourself in the fact that we are going through a phase change and they are turbulent. And yes, you should feel anxiety if you don't know where we are in history because phase changes, the outcome is not written in stone. But you have a president and a team who have a commitment to exit a dying system and get the United States, and he hopes the world, into a much more functional system for human beings. So I just want people to have that in mind, as we go through these discussions and answer the questions both from our subscriber audience and from the super chat.
Thank you, Susan. I'd like to say thank you to everyone in our YouTube audience. Thank you for the super chats. Let us know when you comment, let us know where you're watching from. Barbara, your thoughts on the Tulsi Gabbard?
Well, she continues plowing away and everybody's shooting like crazy at her because what people don't realize is that you've still got a massive deep state presence in Washington, D.C. And so now she's done the second tier of what will be a very big criminal conspiracy indictment, which will come out of the Southern District of Florida. The first part of that indictment is going to be about Barack Obama, the White House, setting up the phony scandal known as Russiagate. She's released all of the goods on that, along with Senator Chuck Grassley. That's fully underway now in the Southern District of Florida. The second tier of that conspiracy indictment is this. Right after Russiagate failed, they set up another, aspect of how to get rid of Trump called impeachment. And, when you see Eric Swalwell, you should think about the fact that he is what he is, but he also was really one of the leaders of that effort, along with Adam Schiff. A lot of people have a different expletive for his last name. So, the point here is that the CIA, working through a guy by the name of Eric Ciarmella, somebody put in the chat, we can finally say his name now. You bet. That was a big deal, despite the fact that Paul Sperry at Real Clear Investigations figured it out, published the name, and proved it. And everybody said, yeah, that's the name. We couldn't say the name in the United States for, a whole period of time, because if you said it, you got instantly banned from social media. He's no longer employed at the CIA. He's now employed at the Carnegie Institute, one of the major British fronts for British intelligence in the United States. Who was he? Who was the whistleblower who came forward to claim that President Trump had said to Zelensky, I want dirt on Joe Biden ahead of the election, said it on a phone call with 20 people sitting there. And not only that, if you don't give me the dirt on Joe Biden in Ukraine, why, I'm going to cut off all aid to Ukraine. That's what this guy said, President Trump said. If you recall what happened as President Trump released the phone call, it was nothing like that. But that set the whole thing in motion. And you got to remember, this coup, as opposed to most coups, which are run by intelligence agencies, this coup against Trump was run by intelligence agencies and lawyers. Lots and lots and lots of lawyers. And the way they figured it out is we can set up this guy as a whistleblower, Ciarmella, by going to the Inspector General of the intelligence community, Michael Atkinson, and doing a phony complaint under the whistleblower statutes. And that will keep his name from becoming public, and nobody will figure out that the guy who's making the allegations against Trump is Biden's CIA guy who traveled with him to Ukraine and actually witnessed all the corruption. All right. So that's how crazy this whole thing was. And he couldn't have done that if Gina Haspel at the CIA didn't approve of it. Okay. And that's one of the heads, which I think is on the block here. So this is critical because what just happened is what Tulsi released is a deposition which was taken of Michael Atkinson, that CIA intelligence community inspector general, who phonied up the complaint, who basically testified that there was nothing improper in what Ciaramella told him, but Ciaramella lied under oath because he met secretly with Adam Schiff and the intelligence committee to set this whole thing up and put it in motion. And what happened was Michael Atkinson revealed a lot of that in this deposition. Adam Schiff took it, classified it, and put it in a safe. And there it sat until all this time. So Tulsi Gabbard jumped in, retreated from the safe, and basically released it. And now it's out there. And now both of these guys are up for criminal prosecution as the second part of this criminal conspiracy case, which is being worked in the Southern District of Florida. The third part will be all about January 6th and the 2020 election, I believe. I think that's the next thing which is actually coming. They're moving systematically. Now, everybody says, well, how come all these people aren't in cuffs? That's the thing we get all the time. And I just like to point out to people, we were targets of the federal government. We got tried all over the place, all right? We got indictments in Boston, Massachusetts, in Eastern District of Virginia, all this other stuff. What happened was that in 1984, the top of the government then decided they wanted to get the organization I was affiliated with at that time, which was Lyndon LaRouche's organization. They decided that in 1984 on orders of the top of the intelligence community. Do you know when the trials actually happened? In 1986, and 1987, and 1988. Even under, an order to basically do something in the old days, it took a great amount of time to actually put your legal ducks in a row, particularly when you're going after people who are in this kind of environment of, judicial insurrection, which we see going on in Washington, D.C. and in the Eastern District of Virginia. Those are the two places where you would actually bring a quick indictment, okay, because that's where the acts occurred. That's the federal law of criminal procedure. But both of those districts are completely poisoned at this point. That's where all of the juries are nullifying indictments again because they hate Trump. Prosecutors are screwing up cases because they hate Trump. That's what's going on, folks. And, you got to actually think that they're thinking very cleverly and very creatively by using the Mar-a-Lago raid as the tipping point to get jurisdiction down in the Southern District of Florida to do this whole thing. And they're going to do it all. So I think people should be enthused about this. I think we're getting to the heart of things. But hey, as Susan just said, this is an intelligence community which has been pretty embedded and compromising presidents for a very, very, very long time. I think John F. Kennedy was correct when he said, I'd like to basically, break up the CIA and scatter its ashes to the winds after the Bay of Pigs. It needs to be drastically reformed, and Tulsi is creating, the basis to actually do that. So that's what I'll say about that. It's, to me, very exciting.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you to everyone watching us on x.com and YouTube. Make sure you drop us a like as you're coming in. And just to go through some quick super chats here. Thank you. Martin Gonzalez, a great thank you for joining us again. Noel 1979, great work from all. Thank you for joining us again. Rad Ran, thank you for drawing back the curtain. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We do 3 political updates a week, plus this live show. John Britton, aka Double Tap, thank you for joining us again. Would you say that We are exiting managed instability and entering an era of America gatekeeping stability.
Yes, in a sense. If by what you mean by gatekeeping, is not the United States going in and imposing things on nations, but if you mean by gatekeeping, all right, we are now going to neutralize all of the supranational, transnational, multinational, extranational organizations that have basically policed the world. And we're going to let you develop the way you want to develop. And if that's how I see this administration moving, because yes, managed instability was one of the key tools in the toolbox of the globalists. This has been the hallmark of Britain's great game, geopolitics, and Donald Trump is definitely exiting that system.
Thank you, Double Tap. Cosmopolitan, thank you very much for the super sticker. Sorry, I can't pull it up on the chat here. Make sure you're subscribed to us. And Chad, thank you very much for joining us. Again, what do you think about Vivify Mariposa? You guys definitely need to please do a podcast with her at some time with Rich, Tommy, or somewhere. She's incredible.
Yeah, I'm doing that on Friday, folks, with Rich. So you can basically pick that up on YouTube.
There you go. So make sure you check out Rich Does Politics. Barbara's going to be on doing an interview with him and Vivify on Friday, right? Okay. So yeah, thank you very much, Chad. Pray Warrior, each of you are the best. As if I told my king, if I would have had either of you for my history teacher and geopolitical science classes, I certainly would have received a better grade and not fallen asleep. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for joining us, Pray Warrior. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And we also have, we have a free newsletter. I'm about to launch the weekly subscription. Right now, we only have a daily email newsletter. I'm going to be launching a weekly one, hopefully in the next few days. The link is in the description. It's completely free. And we'll be able to stay in contact with you outside of the control of YouTube. Thank you, Renee, for joining us and watching from the EU. That's really awesome. Thank you for joining us. Dave Webb, greetings from the Gulf of America. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for joining us, David. And Mustang Deb, super sticker. Thank you for joining us, Deb. All right, so I'm going to start with some questions that we've collected from our email newsletter subscribers. I have topics, plenty of topics that we're going to cover. And I think today we're going to start on the Hungarian election because we definitely got a lot of questions about that. And I think it's, oops, the wrong one. And I think this is on a lot of people's minds. So I'm going to take these first two together. Did Orban play Brussels at their own game by setting up Magyar as opposition and playing the part of being Brussels friendly, knowing full well they would throw everything at Orban? So he played the trap for Magyar to win, knowing full well he would carry on Orban's politics. Is this why Orban walked away and conceded so easily? First thing Magyar has done is to make it harder for migrants. Thank you, Kevin. And the second one here is from Anna. Whoops. This is what I want to turn off. Okay. On Rich Does Politics, Stephen Kuhn was discussing the Hungarian election. Apparently, there's a theory that Orban will work with Trump to destroy the EU. Kuhn said Peter Magyar, the guy who beat Orban, is pro-immigration, while I see a podcast of the Lotus Eaters I have liked, Carl Benjamin, says Magyar is anti-immigration. Kuhn also said that Magyar is a perv who killed a puppy in front of his own children, his beat of wife, a psycho who is a puppet for the EU. So what's the truth of Magyar? And what should we make of all this? Kuhn also said the globalists are rebranding themselves as being on the right. I have noticed some Democrats, liberals like Tiffany Henyard from Illinois here in the US running as Republicans, which is scary. Is this so they can get in office and complete a U-turn? God give us discernment in all this deception. God bless you guys. And thank you, Anna, for your question.
Well, I don't think we know at this point. There's a lot of stuff out there, which is interesting. There's a Serbian intelligence report, which actually says that what's going on here is a grand scheme by Trump and Orban to have Orban run against Ursula von der Leyen to head the EU. I don't know whether that's true or not, but if it's true, it would be a wonderful thing for Europe, to say the least. This guy is a protege of Orban. He basically ran to the right of Orban, if you will, on immigration, wanted to be much firmer on that, a little bit waffly apparently on telling the EU what he would do about Ukraine ascension, which is of course a major issue, and other things. But he's a protege who broke from Orban apparently in terms of appearances when there was a big pedophile scandal in Hungary, and the guy's wife got dismissed by Orban for covering it up. That seems like something that doesn't really strike me as being a reason to go out and form a whole new political party and jump on it, etc. What you can say definitively is that the EU's fascist face has been totally shown in this election. JD went over there for, right in the middle of all the things that are going on with Iran, and, stood in front of the Hungarian people and praised Viktor Orban to the skies. Why did he do that? Well, he said, we knew Viktor was going to lose, but you stand by your man, and Western civilization is worth fighting for. And in Europe, Viktor Orban is one of the few people who actually has spent his political career in the recent period defending Western civilization. He is pro-patriarchy, not into all of the stuff which actually says men are bad. He is pro having kids and children and family. He is openly Christian in his orientation. He is most of all someone who believes in the sovereign nation state. And that's why JD went there, because really the fight in Europe right now is whether we're going to preserve these ideas of Western civilization, or we're going to revert to the pagan ideas of the Roman Empire, which is really what's going on. If you look at the Roman Empire, how corrupt it was, all of the cultural decadence that exhibited in its last days, Europe right now is really almost an exact model of that. Basically, I started to say in my update that, this is what Europe did here, flooding the election with NGOs, keeping Hungary from enforcing any kind of Foreign Agents Registration Act. So they couldn't see whether the NGOs were coming from the European Union, and flooding the place with money to defeat Orban, and then saying, if Orban isn't defeated, we're just going to, take all of Hungary's voting powers away in the European movement, in the European Union. You won't have a voice at all. All right. So that's what Barack Obama calls a democratic victory in a tweet. That's what, Alex Soros calls a democratic victory in a tweet. And that pretty much tells you the battlefronts we're going through right now in terms of the entire transformation of the world by Donald Trump. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Barbara. Susan, here, let me unmute you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Go back to the other one. Because, I think it's important. I mean, first of all, we don't know, but what we can do is we can look at various things that we know have to be happening. And then we're going to figure out who is, doing what in that context. There's no question that there is a layer of the imperial elite which recognizes that certain of their current brands are not working. There is a faction in the imperial elite, and this is your implication in terms of this Illinois situation, where a Democrat, changing brands and running for Republican. Again, you have to put it to the test of, is this just an operation, or is this somebody who, and I don't know, so I'm not going to come to a conclusion, who may actually be having some kind of conversion away from the insanity of the Democratic Party. I mean, we have a Black state representative here who sort of like has stood, a Democrat who stood alone on a couple of occasions in a very close situation in our state legislature when she broke with the Democrats and, prevented some of the worst excesses of happening. She just announced she's leaving the Democratic Party, because she said essentially this party is, it's disgusting. So you do, and given her track record, I think that is a legitimate, move away. But there will be other people who, as you imply, are going to rebrand themselves, because the global elite are going to try and come up with some other option. The phrase which is often put forward is third way. All right, there's people who are simply not going to go with Donald Trump, but there are people who are looking at this ultra-left, ultra-satanic Democratic Party and saying, I ain't going there either. So, they're looking for, okay, where can we channel people? And can we maybe now let the Democratic Party die a natural death and come up with some new kind of formation which captures the people who will not get it, are not ready to join MAGA and the Second American Revolution. So it's just important for people to constantly, and I really liked both of those questions, because they were basically saying, these are hypotheses. What do you think about these hypotheses? And the more that we have discussions on that basis, and the less we have the kinds of discussions, that you get in sometimes the chat and throughout social media, this is the way the world is, boom. The world is changing more rapidly, and I think the rate of change is accelerating. Again, because we're going through a singularity of the dismantling of an old system, which frankly has been in place with its key institutions for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Central banking goes back to Venice. These institutions have been around for hundreds of years. So it is extremely turbulent, and how everybody in the political spectrum reorients themselves to that turbulence and that fast changing system is not something that people should be really eager to come to conclusions to really quickly. You just have to sort of say, all right, we know what the battle lines are. We know what the essential fight is between two systems, and we have hypotheses, and we're going to just see how this thing plays out. Our hypothesis, and our friends, that we do a lot of interviews with, our hypothesis has been Donald Trump is intent on shutting down this imperial system. And if, from my vantage point, everything that I see that he's done since he came back in for his second term, there's nothing that he has done fundamentally that has violated that commitment. Now, you look at, some of the anti-war crowd whose hair is on fire all of the time, and all of their earlier hypotheses about Venezuela, about this, about that, they've actually been pretty dead wrong, but I guess, being humble is not part of their marketing strategy, so they just keep going. But again, I do like the tenor of those questions, because it's extremely important that this methodology of hypothesis and not jumping to conclusions is extremely important in a period like this.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you to everyone watching on the YouTube chat right now. I'm trying to follow it a little bit. Don't get everyone, please, I try not to moderate too much. If somebody gets you worked, there's no reason to get worked over a YouTube chat. So please just relax. People are always going to say dumb stuff. Okay, let's get to some more super chats here because there's a lot of thanks, and it's going to be the segue to our next set of questions here. So first, Melody Hart says, Adam, I need email address to be a moderator. Melody, yes, please go to prometheanaction.com, and there's a button in our menu system to contact us. If you can use any one of those email addresses there to contact us, just send us something to info@prometheanaction.com and tell them that Adam said he wanted to help make me a moderator, and they'll get that email to me, and I'll get it in my inbox. So just reach out to us. Thank you, Melody. Soul Human Consciousness, thank you all. Much love. Thank you for joining us very much. I have Leslie, Crazy Seattle. Just thank you for what you all do. I'm on calls with Paul Glumaz. He is hopeful about Seattle getting involved. Yes, I'm not close friends with Paul. He's a coworker, an acquaintance. He is a very special person. And I know that simply because he believes in Seattle. And I know I watched some of the streamers when it was getting crazy. I see a little bit of Seattle through that lens. So thank you for joining us, Leslie. Thank you for being a part of our network and helping us accomplish things. Double tap again. By gatekeeping, I mean the Straits, Hormuz, Malacca, Panama, Greenland, emerging Northern Passage, and financial. Well, I think probably before Barbara and Susan say anything, I think probably that is the goal. But I think he wants to eventually have it be a more open process. Like he keeps saying, the NATO, if they need that oil, they have to help control it too. It can't just be the United States doing this. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this follow-up here about the gatekeeping?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you clarified. Thanks. No, it's very clear that the president is operating from the standpoint of making sure that the empire can no longer play its choke points. So everybody is watching Hormuz play out, before their eyes. I think people may be aware that the United States just signed a bunch of treaties, including a defense treaty with Indonesia, which definitely impacts the Strait of Malacca, which is another major choke point. Panama, same thing. Greenland, same thing. The president is very, very, very cognizant of the fact that the empire has used these choke points as part of their global control for decades, if not centuries. And yeah, he is definitely moving to end those choke points.
You're muted.
Thank you, John, for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you're on our free email newsletter. Okay, and this next one here I am going to take and I'm going to combine with 3 other questions we got from a newsletter because I think it's important for us to clarify this a little bit. So thank you, Paul, for joining us again. Barbara, Adam, Susan, and Adam, can you please give us a quick summary of your backgrounds so we understand how and why you all have this knowledge? And I'm going to roll that in with these 2 other ones. First one's from Joanne. Glad to have discovered your site. I'm interested in the history of your organization, the backgrounds of Barbara and Susan, and what your strategic goals are for the election and the year. Kindly clarify and expand. Thank you. Thank you, Joanne, for reaching out. Nina, similar question. Could you please review how you have the gravitas for these discussions? I am unfamiliar with your past. And how has it evolved to your reporting? It's not that I disagree, but I'm impressed with your conclusions. But how did you get here? Yes, thank you, Nino. I think Barbara and Susan, I just come in a little bit of a story after Barbara and Susan, but they can begin a little bit of a discussion on this. And finally, from Susan. So thank you, Susan, for this question. I love the content from Promethean and have been watching for only about 6 months. Can you give a little bit of background about how Promethean came to be and more about your backgrounds? You're all clearly very knowledgeable. Thank you, Susan. So Susan and Barbara.
I'm going to let Barbara start.
Okay, well, most people who look at the internet, a lot of people have figured this out. We were formerly associated for many years with a gentleman by the name of Lyndon LaRouche. And I need to say at the outset that we're not associated in any way with Helga Zepp LaRouche or any organizations that she leads. That was Mr. LaRouche's wife. And basically what happens with Promethean coming into being is that after Mr. LaRouche died and his wife took it over, we had political disagreements with her and there was a split. And, you know, some legal actions and a settlement and all sorts of stuff because she didn't want us anymore to use Lyndon's name or associate, you know, with Lyndon in that particular way. So we chose Promethean because we thought that actually represented the heart of what Mr. LaRouche stood for. The idea that you have a fight within civilization, throughout civilization, between fixed systems led by mystical gods who govern human beings, and the idea that human beings are animals, versus the idea that human beings are made in the image of the Creator and participate freely in perfecting creation. That's at the center of a Promethean identity. A lot of people know the story of Prometheus, who stole fire and foresight from the Greek tyrant god Zeus, and basically gave it to mankind, who was then, you know, basically bestial. And that, of course, made the human race into what it is: fire, i.e. transformation of the physical world, and foresight, i.e. intellect and creativity. Now, in our former organization, you know, what happened was that we were, as one of our attorneys said, book people in many ways. We studied history. We studied the great philosophers of history. We studied the actual background to the American Revolution. We studied all of that. We discovered the American system, which Donald Trump, back in the 1970s, you know, people from our European counterparts used to tell us, oh, the United States isn't so great. You know, Benjamin Franklin was just a tinkerer, a pragmatist. And we found out, no, the story is completely different. You know, the American Revolution was based on Leibniz. It was based on a whole different theory of economics invented by Hamilton. And that tradition continued, you know, most spectacularly in the Civil War with Abraham Lincoln and the Carey brothers. And it also continued with, most prominently, McKinley, who you hear President Trump citing all the time, the guy who basically said tariffs were the key to protecting American industries and new inventions. So we have that intellectual background. And then we have what I call the school of hard knocks, okay? In other words, we got gone after. Mr. LaRouche got gone after because, as he used to say, I got too big for my britches from the standpoint of the establishment. And boy, did we get gone after. We were criminally prosecuted. We were slandered in a massive defamation campaign coordinated directly from the Bush White House. That was largely because Mr. LaRouche walked into the Reagan White House and helped collaborate on the Strategic Defense Initiative and negotiations with the Soviet Union about that. That was what he's talking about when he says, I was viewed as getting too big for my britches. That freaked Kissinger out, that freaked the British out, and they said, let's go get them. And they came after us. They did all sorts of things, you know, to us. We had people in prison for a long time. Mr. LaRouche himself was imprisoned. It was all a crazy nonsense prosecution, just like the prosecution. And it was actually led by Robert Mueller, to give you some idea of the correspondence between us and the president. So when all this stuff started happening to Trump, including Russiagate, initially it involved, from my standpoint, a lot of the same people who came after us. The guy who was put on there as the expert in Russian disinformation, before the Senate was a character by the name of Roy Godson. Well, he came after us all the way back in the 1970s. So we're very familiar by being kicked in the head in a certain respect about this network and what it took to fight for survival of these ideas in the context of an actual war for your survival. So that's where I'll sort of end my introduction. I spent a great deal of time in courtrooms, beginning in the late 1970s and throughout the 1980s and 90s. I was kind of the chief paralegal for all of the lawyers. So I have some experience, obviously, with what happens with legal cases in this kind of intelligence context.
Well, I was sort of always on the political front lines. I was campaigning for Bobby Kennedy Sr. in 1968 in California when he was shot. And that has given me, I was fairly young back then, but that has given me, a certain insight into, this question of what happens to people psychologically when they're put through a traumatic experience, and how the enemy uses this kind of psychological warfare, to manipulate people, control people, break people. But I was very fortunate, after going through a kind of dark period after that, to run into the organization of Lyndon LaRouche on my college campus. And it has been a series of hypotheses, which has been really fascinating. Now, at the time, most of the people who were joining the LaRouche movement back then were on the left, because we were recruiting from college campuses, and that's what was going on the left. But we started to do some very interesting things, like we defended Richard Nixon from the CIA coup. And I was one of the people in Washington, D.C., meeting with people in the Nixon administration and in the Congress, going through our rudimentary understanding of how the deep state worked. And that was kind of talk about hypothesis question. Here we were, sort of not so much Republicans at the time, but trying to figure out what was going on in the world, defending Richard Nixon. That was strange. But it was clear that people were paying a great, great, great deal of attention to us, that we were absolutely onto something. And it's become clear since then, I think, in terms of what that was all about. And subsequent to that, I spent about 10 years in Washington, D.C., representing our ideas in Congress, seeing how decent people who back in the 70s or the 80s still had a basic commitment to fundamental principles in the United States, like economic growth, the defense of the working class, not having perpetual wars, but nonetheless dealing with the fact that there were enemy forces out there we had to deal with. How those good people would just get knocked out, by operations, and continued this journey. And I think the most important discovery made, Barbara has already referenced, because our entire time frame, our entire philosophical worldview just clicked in when we discovered the American system. Because when our organization began in the very late 60s and the early 70s, we, like most other people, did not know there was something called the American system. We were operating in the world where you have Wall Street run capitalism or communism, and trying to figure out, all right, well, neither one of those work. What are we going to do? And then we discovered the American system. And again, everything clicked into place at that point. And we were able to then sharpen our intervention into the political situation in the United States. This is a really wonderful book by a deceased colleague of ours. Well,
I think there's a little bit more than that. I believe this book and the resulting research was a lot of the basis for us to develop this American system hypothesis. Was Graham Lowry, and the problem is it's going to be, I guess it's still in print here. I'm seeing $9.99. So yeah. This is something that people are definitely going to want to review right here.
Right. And in fact, our colleague, Chuck Park, has recently done 2 classes on the America that you don't know. which talks about this real history and where the United States of America actually came from and how we developed this marvelous new system called the American system of political economy. And that's, I mean, that is really where we all come from. You know, once you get that sort of sorted out in your head, you can then look at history and you can look at what is going on in the world and saying, where does it fit in this battle? Because this battle of the sovereign nations with the American system of political economy versus the imperial system with bestial British free trade economics, that's the battle in the world. And once you figure that out, things become a lot clearer.
Thank you, Susan. And just a little bit about my background. I got sucked into this political process literally after September 11th, 2001. I was hardly 19 years old at the time. I remember waking up on 9/11. My girlfriend's mom at the time woke us up, told us to turn on the television, watching the second plane hit the building. And then after that, my girlfriend, who was going to school at the time in university, she met organizers from the organization. And over a period of weeks, I started political organizing, and then over decades now working in this process and building websites and other stuff. That's how I came to be. So for me, it was mostly learning stuff. I'm not really so much of a historically oriented person, so it took me a much longer time to kind of uptake on the historical issues, including the issue of the British Empire. But that was literally Lyndon's major part of Lyndon's thesis was that the British Empire and the vestiges of their financial system are still America's enemies to this very day. And I think more people now are beginning to see the seriousness of that hypothesis, especially when they realize what Trump is doing now in rearranging all the Middle East oil agreements that have been in place for hundreds of years now, getting reorganized. I think people are beginning to realize that maybe it's true. So thank you very much, Paul. I hope I've answered your question on this. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you get on our free newsletter. I want to keep going here. PGK Dan, you are all doing the Lord's work. Thank you, PGK, for joining us every week. We really appreciate having you here. Joelle, so glad I found this channel, learned so much. You are all amazing, but Susan has a special place in my heart. She reminds me so much of my mom. Thank you. Jolene, thank you very much. We have a free newsletter. Consider getting our free newsletter, and please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel here. Another one here from Shan. Thank you all for the information and valuable analysis you provide. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel. We're going to be doing a next political briefing on Saturday. Okay, before I continue here, I have some more super chats, including some big ones. Let me jump back to the questions here from our newsletter subscribers. I want to continue on this international theme because I think there's a lot developing there that we should definitely continue to address. So we're going to start off with some more questions on Hungary, but for a larger political, you'll see, a larger political sphere. Thank you, Leslie. How concerned are you about Viktor Orban's demise? How about Carney having the majority? And why did those politicians flip to his side? You say it's all over. However, Alex Soros looked absolutely gleeful at Peter Magyar's win. All of this makes me extremely nervous. So thank you, Leslie. And Caroline, the globalists won in Hungary. Starmer is pushing the UK back into Europe. Are we losing?
Well, I think we addressed a little bit about the Hungarian election and the kind of basis for that. It's true that Alex Soros was celebrating. That's because Orban kicked George Soros and all of his institutions out of Hungary in 2018 in a very big blow to how this stuff actually operates. So no, we're not losing. We're in a war. That's what people have to basically take in. We're in a war. We're in a war to change the whole map, not just a little part of it or anything else, because once you get into it, think about this. Trump comes into office. He pledges to actually completely reshape and put in the economy of the future in the United States. Can that happen by itself? Just in, here in the United States? Apparently Tucker Carlson believes that. But that's not exactly what's going on in the world at this point. You're coming in a very integrated globalist economy in which our supply chains are out there, having been outsourced years ago, and we got to bring them back into the United States. We have a major drug problem in our country in terms of our labor force. Where's that coming from? It's not coming from inside the United States. Yes, you can say that Soros and his organizations who have gone into these open drug markets are a big part of it, but it's a criminal operation coming from the outside aimed at destroying the United States. What people don't understand is the nature of cultural warfare. They think warfare is only weapons and bombs and things like that. We have been under cultural attack from the outside, ever since the end of World War II. Most emphatically after 1971 and the advent of what was called the counterculture. Rocks, drugs, sex, tune in, turn on, drop out. That was kind of the phrase which was used after all the assassinations in the 60s and 70s drove people out of politics. So you have to think about this in terms of a massive war going on, where if Orban's loss was somehow a plot to go after von der Leyen, that's an interesting way to think about it. We don't know if that's what's going to happen. We have to see how this plays out. It may be what's called a Pyrrhic victory for Soros et al. But every point of this battle, the enemy is being exposed to people. And that's what people have to understand. You're looking at, don't immediately say, oh, I see this enemy, it's satanic and let's put him in cuffs. You have to say, no, that you've got a whole sections of populations here who believe in this stuff, who have been sucked into it. How do we change them? Well, we change them by having these types of confrontations, which Trump is doing throughout the world, and exposing their evil and people picking up the sword of being God's right arm in terms of actually changing this entire situation. So that's how I'd answer your question. Canada and Carney, I don't know. I haven't looked at how the vote came in there in terms. And for people who don't know, Canada just had an election in which, for the first time, Carney got a majority in the parliament in Canada, which gives him a majority type of governing position. One would suspect that there's a great deal of hanky-panky going on there, because Carney has become the face of who's the enemy against us. He is the world's central banker of central bankers. He went from being the central banker of the Bank of Canada to the Bank of England, and then to the UN as the climate czar to implement the Great Reset. Right now, he's trying to work out a coalition in the world against Trump and the United States, what they're calling the third way. Not China. They haven't won the battle with China. They clearly recognize that. Not the United States, but somehow middle powers all ganging up on the United States. That's the plan. So we're in a big war, and you got to have tenacity and strength coming from your knowledge of the actual battle to keep going. But that's what we hope to give you.
Susan, any thoughts on these
well,
two here?
In terms of Starmer pushing the UK back into the EU because they had voted for Brexit and never really quite implemented it and all this kind of stuff. Look, first of all, Starmer is pretty weak tea from the standpoint of people who can orchestrate anything. I think, as Barbara said, keeping your eye on what Carney is doing probably gets you a lot closer to how the global elite are actually functioning. All of these guys are scrambling right now because they are up against something which, as we said at the top of this show, you haven't seen for decades. They are up against a president wielding the power of the United States as a sovereign nation. They are not on the offensive. So, they're going to try and readjust. They're going to come up with this. They're going to come up with that. In some cases, it will mean a setback in a particular part of the world. I saw in the chat, somebody said if Alberta votes for independence, Carney will, use emergency powers, to prevent that. Well, if he does, then as Barbara just made the point, they are exposed for what they are. And you can bet the ramifications of that in the rest of Canada would be far greater, perhaps, than Alberta leaving. Again, you constantly have to think about this, not from the standpoint of fixed positions, but rather, what is the end goal of this thing? And it is to break the grip of the City of London and British geopolitics and imperial oligarchical ideology over this planet forever. And, from our combined standpoint of probably almost 200 years between the three of us of political experience, we are seeing more action on that front than we've ever seen in our lifetimes. Is it over? Have we won? Obviously not. That's where you all come in.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you to everyone who's watching, including on X.com. I wanted to pull one of them up. Somebody on X.com said, if someone would have told me 18 months ago that I would get this excited to see a couple of silver foxes talk for 2 hours, I would have slugged them. Sorry, I don't have your X handle here to show, but thank you very much for saying it. We super appreciate that. Thank you for joining us on X.com. Thank you. Please make sure.
Yes. I was just going to say, one of my favorite descriptions of Barbara and I is based grandmas. Not that either one of us are grandmas, but we get the idea.
So thank you to all of our friends on X.com for joining us. All right, let me say some more thank you here. Here's a big one from Debs. Thank you very much, Debs 951. Important to study language, especially doublespeak from the left, which Trump counters often, and realize with real eyes. We have been mind-controlled and misinformed by the system. Freedom is protected when the people have knowledge and participate. Yes, I think that those last two words there make the entire thing. The participation part is what I hope our organization will inspire in some of you. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this comment here?
Well, it's very perceptive. Trump, what ticks people off about Trump is he's so very, very, very American. Okay. I mean, he's gross, he's blatant and sophisticated at the same time very often. And very sophisticated in his understanding of people. I said yesterday, who would have thought that a real estate guy from Queens would be smarter than all those Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge graduates in actually running a situation to reorder the world? Well, he's proving that every single day, and that's what has them completely freaked out. But the point is this, and yes, the system is largely what has been called accurately perception management. That's what all the news media is. So what he keeps doing is doing these really apparently obnoxious tweets, all right, or posts on his X accounts, which just come off authentically. This is what I think at this point. This is how I'm thinking. Get into my headset versus their headset, okay? And their headset is all the crap which you've lived through for all of these years, which you've seen in every single aspect, at least for the last 20 years, has ended up, basically almost destroying half of the country or a great deal of the country and creating a culture which says we have no future. Now we're going back to the moon and we're talking about colonies on Mars. And how's that for something your kids or grandkids can think about as an adventure? an actual adventure for the human mind. It's breaking with the system, but it depends on that last line there. Freedom is protected when the people have knowledge and participate, as Adam underlined. All right, we're headed into the midterm elections. They clearly have their plan in place. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people and lots and lots and lots of money, all aimed at creating the basis of, the kind of crap the Democrats are pulling right now, but in the majority. And if that happens, then a whole big part of this is going to be stymied. So we've got to actually do what we did in 2024, but even on a grander scale. We've got to pull in all sorts of people who don't think right now that they're aligned with the president. That's a big challenge. But he's going to do a lot of work towards that. We're going to do a lot of work towards that. And we need everybody to up their game. It's being on the edge, like from my experience, almost being put in jail. It really did cause me to think about things a whole lot differently than I was thinking about them before. You start to think about what is life really all about. Think about Trump coming up after he gets grazed by that bullet and saying, fight, fight, fight. Did he know at that point whether he was alive or dead? Did he know whether that wound was actually real? The answer is that at that particular point in time, he changed a great deal because he entered this kind of a view which says all of the things which I thought were important are really not that important. What's important is the future for our people and our children, and I'm going to go about creating that. So I think that's the answer to your question, probably a little bit too long there.
No, you're fine, Barbara. Thank you very much for that. Susan, any comments before we move on here?
Not on that.
Okay. So thank you very much, Debs, for your very generous super chat. Please make sure you get our free newsletter. The link is in the description. Here's one from G. Caldwell. Someone, and I think you could go further with this. Someone should produce a movie short from Xiomara's point of view showing this crazy web of deceit. It would mop the floor with fiction. I think, honestly, I thought about you could probably do a whole feature-length movie on the plot to undermine Trump. It is just filled with intrigue, filled with secret spooks in skiff compartments in these blocked off rooms that are electromagnetically shielded. It is such a spy story. Pronounce Magyar like Magyar for near perfect. Is that how you actually supposed to pronounce it?
Yeah, in Hungarian it's Magyar. And it's also Budapest.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. It is. It's actually, from what I know, it used to be two cities.
You had
Buda and you had Pest.
Buda and Pest.
And they merged together over the river. Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed here. Giovanni, thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you for the super chat. Australia is the experiment. We need help badly. Yeah, I think Australia started off as a little bit of an experiment, I think.
Yes.
Okay. No, thank you very much to all of our Canadian and Australian viewers. We get so many comments, and unfortunately, we're not aligned with we're not officially aligned with any political movements. We don't really know what's going on, like in super detail, like you guys do all the time. But thank you very much for tuning in. We're all very attuned to all the English-speaking nations. We get so many questions from y'all. So thank you very much. Please make sure you're tuned in. I have some questions here from Australia and from Canada, which I hope to get to. When my research discovered the UK was a globalist epicenter, I thought I was alone in the wilderness until I found the great American patriots of Promethean. Keep shining the light of truth. God bless. Thank you, The New Life. Please make sure our free newsletter, the link is in the description. And I want to take one more here from Hoax Fan before I jump back to our email questions here. Hoax Fan, in Southeast Washington, we think Seattle should be renamed Crazy Town. The Benton County Republican Party wants to help change that. Get in touch. Thank you, Hoax Fan.
Well,
If
actually,
Paul,
while we're there, in terms of that party, oh, I don't know why. This might be a good time to plug our boot camp. Because if you are active in a local Republican Party, a local MAGA group, you want to figure out how to navigate these incredibly important midterm conventions. Promethean Action's political arm, which is called Promethean PAC, conducts a bi-weekly midterm boot camp. The next one is tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern. You can go to prometheanpac.com. I can't seem to move. I wonder if I didn't upload that. Anyway, doesn't matter. There we go. But I can't, for some reason, I can't move through there, Adam.
it appears to be you only uploaded maybe a single image. It's
maybe I did. Yeah, so you
slide.
can take that down. That's not my slideshow. Never mind. I uploaded the image, not the slideshow. Promethean. What we do is we have activists from around the country. Some candidates sometimes join us and discuss their experience in trying to get Trump's policies across. I'm going to sneeze. It's suddenly spring here in Michigan, so the pollen is just taken over. This is our Promethean PAC website. You see up in the upper right-hand corner where it says Midterm Boot Camp, and you sign up for our boot camp and get on, again, our biweekly Zoom calls. And again, the next one is tomorrow night. These are a lot of fun. We get reports from our activists around the country who have used our half-page flyer on the economic revolution which President Trump is taking to organize other people. We always have really great reports. I know one of the reports we're going to get tomorrow night is one of our leaders in Houston, Texas, was invited to address a Republican women's meeting, I think in Dallas, over 100 people there. Just a really, really excited response, again, on this question of putting the pieces together. But the purpose of these boot camps is, how do you take these ideas, this grounding of ourselves in history and in the nature of the real battle, and bring that in an action way into these midterm elections, where in some cases you may not have the best candidates on the Republican side, although a lot of places we're still working through the primaries and we still have a chance of getting good Republican candidates. But we're going to have to win these elections no matter what, because we, as everyone knows, we cannot let the House or the Senate, or God save us both, fall into the hands of the Democrats. In this case, I will call them the Democrats, because that would be the effect of them taking this back. So, as everybody on this call knows, we are dealing with massive psychological warfare in terms of the American population. That is what we are trying to do. And Adam is highlighting the sign up. And then all the previous boot camps are in that tab where it says boot camp resources. You can watch our previous shows, get access to flyers, which you can order or download, look at some of our slideshows where we give people some of the working material. So please make the move over to our political universe, Promethean PAC, and enlist in our boot camp.
Thank you. I'll just say a few brief things on this because I think it's important to always clarify this. Thank you for supporting Promethean Action. Promethean Action allows us to cast a really wide net of support, because Promethean Action, technically, we're only an educational arm. So we can educate people on these issues, but Promethean Action itself can't take direct political action for a candidate or against a candidate. Promethean Action, we can't run get out the vote campaigns. Promethean PAC can. So that's the reason why we have two organizations, and Promethean PAC is hosting these events, because our goal is to get you to take the education you got from Promethean Action and be able to bring that into real world political campaign, winning a campaign and stuff. So that's just a little bit of a background of why we have two organizations and why we have to do them a little bit separately here. Barbara, any comments on the political this boot camp process? Because technically you are the treasurer of Promethean PAC.
So true. You know, look, we have a huge job ahead, folks, and it's clearly not going to be done in the same way that happened in 2024. In 2024, you had a whole lot of people who were behind the president and were on the same page in terms of really being an antidote to the mainstream media and all the brainwashing which they do of the population every single day. That has been a target. You know, that coalition that behind the scenes of political organizers has been the target of this major operation, starting with Charlie Kirk's assassination and the kind of trauma which that put his very close staff and also his very close friends through. Now you have Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, all the people the president called out this last week, often Never Land, you know, actually talking about using the 25th Amendment. Those people played a central role because they were on the same page during the run up to 2024. You can say, well, they're just influencers, but it's enormously important for people not to have a place to go in addition to the White House to actually find out what's going on. You know, if you go to the White House, they do a very, very good job of telling people what they're doing. But it's got to be amplified out there. You have to blanket the place, just like the media does, to be able to get your message through. So that's the idea of the boot camp. We're hoping to draw in candidates. We're hoping to draw in other people to say, we're gonna talk about what Trump is doing with the American system here as our primary goal, because people don't realize, A, how bad it was under Biden, and you know, the very idea of having an incompetent, a knowing incompetent sitting in the president's chair for 4 years is really difficult for me to stomach. I got to tell you the truth about that, because it says something about our people, how suckered they were by the mainstream media, and what a job we have to do to actually overcome that. But it can be done. You know, if you look at Trump's 2016 campaign, he didn't have any money. He was outspent almost 11-1. He didn't have any staff, really. He had Corey Lewandowski and a couple other people working for him on the original campaign. He flew around the country in his plane, and he rallied the people. Why did that work? Because there's a whole slew of people out there who actually understand this fight, who actually understand we're in a war for our country, but they're the targets of a massive demoralization campaign, you know, basically telling you, hey, you know, this isn't going to work. The enemy is overpowering. Why don't you give up and go relax and, you know, take a break, smoke some dope and forget about it. That's basically what's being thrown at active political cadre every single day. So we're here as a force to actually act against that. That's what we're all about in terms of this election. And we're also about winning the election. We hope to grow now so that we can do, you know, my idea as treasurer is I'd like to have a fund that we could actually do a lot of what are called independent expenditures, where you can put Promethean stamp on opposition ads, on positive ads for candidates for or against. I think given what we've shown we can do in terms of putting the picture together for people, that's a challenge for us, but it requires a lot of money to be able to do that, to produce the ads and to place them and pay for them. So that's where I would really like to take this, as well as supporting and educating as many candidates as we can to, like Gideon's army, carry this message out to the people massively. And that's the idea.
Let me add one more thing. Adam, I did get my slideshow loaded, if you could share that.
Yeah, I see it here.
Yeah. Look, the best antidote to the psychological warfare in social media, or your legitimate anxiety over where the country is to go out and do something. I guarantee you that's my prescription for anxiety. Do something. This is our half-page flyer, which gives people a sense that the president is carrying out a revolution. We use the term President Trump's Republican New Deal because he did. And I think that is a good way of approaching it to kind of shake people up. The backside is a quick snapshot of some of the things that this administration had already accomplished as of 2025. If we tried to update it in terms of all the groundbreaking new plants, new investment, and so on going on, we'd have to do a pamphlet. Actually, we are preparing a pamphlet. That stay tuned in terms of that. But this we thought gives some of the highlights. And again, if you go back to the top of the show, when I talked about all the things that are happening for the first time in decades, I mentioned for the first time in 27 years, we're out producing more steel than Japan. But the first graphite processing plant in over 70 years. You got to be a boomer to have been around when we last had a graphite processing plant. The first primary aluminum smelter in 50 years. The first rare earth magnet production in decades. These things are big. This is big. So we prepared this so that people had some kind of ammunition. And it's just a really good place to start. You don't even have to start with the side that says Donald Trump's Republican New Deal. You start with this side, you just start showing, did you know this? Did you know this? Did you know this? And get the conversation going in terms of it. So you see there where you can go to order that in multiple copies. And again, if you're active in local groups, Republican parties, MAGA movements, and so on, these are great things to have to equip and arm your fellow patriots with the weapons that we need to go out and recruit people to this incredible transformation which is taking place.
Thank you, Susan. And the link, if you want to download the flyer, the link is right there below. All right.
Yeah, you can order the full color version, or you can download a printer friendly version. Either way, we want it out.
There's a printer friendly black and white version at the link there, and also a link where you can buy some for yourself, color ones like we have here. All right, we have so many super chats and so many other questions here. So first, let me say thank you to Hoax fan. Paul Glumaz, if you're watching, maybe you want to get in touch with the Benton County Republican Party. Thank you very much for joining us today. Next one, super chat I have here is from the UK, and I am going to load up a question here from the UK so we can just answer a question from our email newsletter at the same time. So Fabulous Wanderer says, Starmer knows he is the most despised person in history in the UK. Pure evil, and his main aim now is to make us suffer the worst here. Thank you, Fabulous Watchers, for bringing that up. And here's a question here from Keith. Do you think it is possible for England and NATO just to wait it out until there is a liberal United States president so they can reset everything back to the imperial system? Is that something they can snap back to relatively easily?
Well, none of it is going to be easy either way. There is look, this was their strategy in the first Trump term, the infamous House of Lords report, which Barbara made famous, where they said we can essentially survive one term of Trump, but not two, where it is, essentially a confession that we got to stop this guy. So they prevented his second term at the time, but we fought back and we now have a second term. I just saw, I can't remember who it was. It was either someone from the House of Lords or the intelligence community saying just this, the best we can do is hang on for 3 years and hope that we get rid of him. and that we can go back. Again, this comes back to you all, especially here in the United States. Whether or not this becomes permanent, this revolution that Donald Trump has underway is very much up to you and up to the what happens in the midterms. So, yeah, I mean, Starmer he's despised, but honestly, he's also pathetic. Actually, somebody described, it was Jeff Childers in Coffee and COVID. He said, Starmer looks like a failed taxidermy experiment.
And just a quick shout out here to Justin. Starmer couldn't organize a sucky in the hen house. Maybe that's a little bit graphic, but yeah, I think that feeling is universal. So thank you, Fabulous Wanderers. Barbara, any comments on Keith's question?
Well, I think that's pretty clear that they're trying to figure out a way to wait it out, that they're trying to put things in place to actually reshape things. And it really does depend on whether the American people stick by this revolution or not. Clearly, they're throwing everything they have. They don't give a damn. And we're throwing everything we have. We don't give a damn either, from that standpoint, because we have to create a future here. We have to create a future for our children. And what the NATO and England's under, basically this City of London dictatorship represents is a horrible world. Just go back, to COVID and Biden and all the stuff you lived through. That was horrible. But we got through it, and we got through it and elected, as a result, Donald Trump, President of the United States. And we have to bring that emotional catharsis really to the front of the battle right now in terms of the midterms. Because, hey, the President of the United States was absent. I mean, I loved the President, Donald Trump, talking to kids about the difference between his autograph and, he told the kids at the Easter hunt, here's my autograph. You should go and actually sell it on eBay. You'll probably get $25,000 for it. And then at the same time, he said, you know what Joe Biden did? He didn't give his autograph because he couldn't. He had this giant machine behind him called the auto pen. And what he did was just have the auto pen. What do you think of that? Would you rather have my autograph, or would you rather have the auto pen? I thought that was a very succinct way of actually putting something which was horrible into kind of a delightful juxtaposition. So just remember, think about that speech at Independence Hall, all bathed in red. If that didn't remind you of Mussolini and Hitler, I don't know what could. It was horrible. And that's what they'd like to bring back. So we have to basically dig into people what that was, which many people have experienced, don't like it, but don't really fully understand it. And then we have to, at the same time, present the alternative, which is a really exciting future. So that's what I have to say about the question.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Fabulous Wanderers, for joining us this afternoon. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. I want to give a quick shout out here to a friend from Norway. Thank you very much for joining us, Norwegian friend. I'm not even going to try and pronounce your name. I'm sorry. But thank you very much for joining us from Norway. We have a free email newsletter. Links in the description. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We're going to have many more videos. Quick shout out to Chad. Thank you for joining us, Chad. F the Bushes, F Fox News, F the Rhinos. I cuss like a sailor because I am an effing sailor. Also, I've been watching a lot of Tom Luongo lately. Yeah, that'll do it. Sure. Thank you, Chad, for the support. I hope you're getting our free newsletter. And here's one maybe Barbara can take up real quick. Do you believe that the 2012 relaxation of the Smith-Mundt Act under Obama contributed to the radicalization of Americans causing this chaos? Thank you, Michael 2460 for the super chat. Barbara, any quick thoughts on that one?
Actually, no. I don't think that. I mean, there were a lot of things which happened around propaganda directed at Americans in the Obama administration. Most certainly, the key thing he did, which people are missing when they focus on Smith-Mundt, is he actually set up a whole censorship regime beginning in 2012 in NATO called the Strategic Center for Global Communications. And that was put into the State Department to actually do exactly that, to pump out propaganda to the American people, well ahead of Smith-Mundt and what happened there in terms of relaxing whatever stuff was left. But this really goes back to Reagan. Okay, I mean, in other words, the Reagan administration, after the Church Committee stuff, was the first people to actually create a propaganda regime based on, all the stuff around arming the Contras, directed specifically at Americans. And that was a relaxation and reinstitution of what was called during the Church Committee Operation Mockingbird, which was using journalists to parrot the intelligence community lines on everything under the sun. So this is really much, much more than Smith-Mundt under Obama. It's really a NATO operation, and trying to get the internet under control, which was a primary function of what Obama was trying to do. Cass Sunstein was the head of technology in the White House under Obama. And he said, basically, the internet is completely out of control. And what the government has to do is get in there, run the chat rooms, and do what they called create cognitive dissonance among the people who actually are espousing anti-Trump and anti-Obama types of feeling states and other things on the internet. So it's a bigger story than just Smith-Mundt. I mean, I know everybody on the internet's focused on that, but the background is much, much more deep and also involves Executive Order 12333 under Reagan, which gives the intelligence community the ability, and private contractors for it, the ability to lie about what they're doing.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Michael, for sending in your question. Please, again, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Link to our free email newsletter is in the description. Okay, let me get to some comments and questions from our Canadian friends, both from the super chats and from the email. So I'm going to start here with some super chats. iBackshift says, how can I get Adam to make a paper on Mark Carney? Okay, it's heard. I can definitely take that up as a topic. I can take it and run with it in our conservative movement, provide details that our Canadian conservatives are missing and don't report on. Okay. I'm gonna have to do some basic research. I think maybe I can, between Barbara and I think we can pull together something that may be a good report for our readers. So that is definitely something I'll keep in mind for the future. Thank you for suggesting that. Also have one from the Drew J. Carney stole that with paying off floor crossers from conservatives at NDP. He won 3 by-elections, but stole the other 5 floor crosser seats by poaching outside of the Westminster electoral system. Okay, thank you for that comment. Unfortunately, I don't know a lot of the details of that. And I have another one here from Karantov 1. I am from Canada, and a writing President Carney having a majority government is irrelevant. I have tried emailing you guys to explain why. Okay.
All right, we'll look for that email and also look into the other stuff. I mean, we were discussing beforehand that we haven't taken a look at this most recent election other than to note its outcome. So appreciate anything that you're sending in to us.
Okay, so then I'm going to take 3 questions here from our email newsletter. Again, all in the Canada is a wider issue. Canadian here, another brilliant video. You mentioned the banks in the UK being used for Iranian money. I just found out yesterday on Rich Does Politics, Canada's banks are corrupt and being used also by the terrorists. How does this play in with this situation? Do you think it will get exposed? Carney is about to get his liberal corrupt majority. Carney made a huge statement yesterday. He says they are stopping paying U.S. for military support. Of course, he lied about the amounts, and they have dismantled our military. But he had the audacity to say that they are getting ready to defend Canada if the USA invades us. He also manufactured the 2% NATO target. Between the Chinese laundering and the terrorist money, etc., do you think Trump will target him directly? So many of us are counting on it. Thank you, Laura, for your question. Murray says, please tell us when they will shut down the corruption in the drug dealing cartels in Canada. Thank you. Love your show. You ladies are great. Thank you, Murray, for the question. And this next one from Christiane. I am Canadian, and as you know, our PM Carney not good. My question is it true that the Vice President J.D. Vance is investigating Carney and planning on showing the world who he really is, a dictator to Canada? If yes, what does it mean for us Canadians? What can we expect from this? Will him and his caucus be in charge? I really hope, if it's true, that something majorly good will surface sooner rather than later before it's too late for us. Thank you so much, and hope that you're considering my question. We are considering a question. Thank you for writing it in, Christiane. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on these questions, the current state of Canada. Clearly, there are so many people in Canada that want to see a similar kind of revolution in Canada.
Well, that's that American stuff floating over the border. No, the point here is the questions about what Canadian banks do. It's all true. They are fronts for terrorism. They are fronts for drug money laundering, and always have been. And you can pick up a lot of that on the internet, and just search it, Canadian drug banks, etc. There's lots of people who do this as a specialty just because it's so prevalent. But the real issue here is, what are you guys going to do about it? I think Scott Bessent is going to target them because the whole Trump idea here is the Western Hemisphere. You guys are in the Western Hemisphere. Why did Trump actually say he wanted Greenland and to make Canada a 51st state? Well, if you understand that the most fundamental thing a president has to do is defend his own country, and find the way to do that. And if you think about incoming drones and nuclear drones, to be specific, or other things, you really do need what Trump is talking about as the Golden Dome defense. And it really works. You can't just blank out Greenland and Canada and say, okay, now I see what's going on as these things come over the horizon. It is an essential national security policy for the United States in one way or another. Clearly, the British Empire saw what was going to be planned here in terms of Canada, and is doing everything in its power to hold Canada in tow, and the Danes are doing everything to hold Greenland in tow. I don't think it's going to work, and I think probably right after we get out of securing the Middle East, we're going to come right back to our own hemisphere, and Canada is very much going to be on the agenda. I can't speak to whether JD is investigating Carney, but I think Carney himself is showing the world that he is really the dictator of Canada. When Adam prepares the thing he just volunteered to prepare, I think the most essential thing to know about this man is that back in 2019, he made some proposals at the forum which the Federal Reserve holds every year in Wyoming. And basically, he called for a world digital currency, not related to the dollar, replacing the dollar with this world digital implement. And he called specifically for committees of technicians like himself, central bankers, to be in charge of all political decisions in every country in the world, because politicians had clearly screwed it up. So just think of those two central propositions in terms of your life, and tell me this guy isn't a Nazi. Basically that's where he's at. That's what he's about. That's who supports him. and he's a very smooth talker, which is why they have him out front in terms of him being the primary guy who is out there talking against Trump in the world. They can't put Macron out there because his wife keeps beating him up. But, you know, essentially, I think that Carney is the type of guy they want, as Trump would call him, central casting for a central banking dictatorship.
Yeah, let me add one more thing on this. Adam, if you could share the screen. Because this has implications for all of these questions. Yesterday, the Treasury announced it's launching economic fury. Now, it's immediately aimed at Iran and money flows, obviously the oil, but also the financial institutions which have ensured that money flows for the IRGC could continue no matter what, many of them based in London. So the Treasury just announced that they are moving aggressively with economic fury. Financial institutions should be on notice that the department is leveraging the full range of available tools and authorities and is prepared to deploy secondary sanctions against foreign financial institutions that continue to support Iran's activities. Well, those same powers can be used to protect our hemisphere from drug money laundering and support for terrorism, which certainly includes a whole lot of Canadian and Caribbean offshore banks. So this is the kind of quiet side of the war that not enough people look at, but probably one of the most fundamental.
Thank you, ladies. And thank you to our YouTube super chatters and all of our supporters from Canada. Barbara and I will work out something on Mark Carney for everyone. Just give us a little bit. Thank you, everyone. Let's keep going here. I'll take some more super chats, and then I'll throw in some more questions here from our live audio, from our email newsletter. So Wolf's Larson, Barbara and Susan are on a level. Bravo. Thank you for joining us, brother. Again, please make sure you're subscribed. Peon Perspectives. I hope Mr. X himself is helping you people. Is that the historical Mr. X, Colonel Prouty from back in the day? Thank you for the super chat. Please make sure you're subscribed. We're going to be doing more political briefings coming up here soon. Oh, thank you, Karin Taver. Got you. Daisy Coca, thank you for joining us again. If the Trump administration doesn't get control of the corrupt media, I don't see how we can win the midterms. What can a Trump administration do to get control of the mainstream media? I'm gonna pull in two questions here from our audience, which I think goes to the other side, which is the quote unquote not mainstream media, which is still part of the issue on this greater question. So this next one's from Iru. Why has Trump turned on his supporters like Tucker, Marjorie Greene, Tulsi? I don't think he's turned on Tulsi. Alex Jones. And thank you, Iru. And the second one here is, currently, what's your opinion on Tucker Carlson? So these two questions, I think you have the mainstream media, right, hitting Trump on one angle, and then you have this like other rogue, maybe people that you wouldn't consider part of the necessary mainstream anymore. You have these rogue influences that are also whacking Trump from this other angle. How do we?
In some ways, I think that the second group of people are more important than the first. I mean, most people out there in the population don't spend a whole hell of a lot of time, reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or watching. A lot of people watch Fox, which is a major thing, and that's why Trump spends so much time on Fox. But if you actually look at the ratings at all these other places, they're pretty dismal. Just because people have stuff to do, they don't have time to, mess around with a bunch of stuff that proves itself to be false. These influencers, however, are, in my view, far more corrosive, because the thing that actually, the big fight, if you recall, has been over the internet. Remember that Joe Biden basically got elected in 2020, aside from the fraud for a second, by censoring the internet completely in terms of the story about his corruption in Ukraine. And people turned to the internet as an alternative to fake news. So having key figures on the internet actually peddling this nonsense and peddling what I call black pilling of the MAGA movement is in many respects far more significant than what's going on with the mainstream media. So, what's my opinion on Tucker Carlson? I think he got freaked out. I think he's a very, very fearful person. You can go through all the connectos on him. Yeah, his dad was CIA. I don't think that necessarily translates into, that makes him an evil person. The issue is he's a very fearful person. He's been threatened clearly in some way, which, is not, I don't think, from Netanyahu. I think it's from the Brits and the intelligence community. And I also think he just got completely freaked out and disoriented when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. That assassination stuff is, from a political operation standpoint, is designed specifically for that, to make you so frightened and so freaked out and thinking you're not in control of things, and then backing it up with all sorts of nonsense in terms of what actually happened, that it's a very powerful Psy-war kind of drink to be drinking. Susan can tell you about that from her own experience with the Kennedy assassination. I can tell you about it from my whole experience of 1968, where a lot of people I knew who were really looking to be involved in politics just said, hey, it's not worth it. I can't deal with this. I'm too fearful. And I think that's what's happened to Tucker, and he's become a parody in many ways of someone who's really thinking things through. He's joined in the religious warfare, which is actually, being brought to this country from the Middle East as a deliberate psychological warfare operation. Are you for or against the Jews? Are you for or against Netanyahu? Binary choices. Are you therefore for the Iranians? Are they the resistance to Netanyahu? It's all basically taking the religious warfare model that they work so well in the Middle East and trying to impose it on our country. Now we're seeing stuff with Catholics and Protestants, and the president, the Pope, is actually getting long meetings with David Axelrod, Barack Obama's political strategist. What do you think that's about? So that's how I'd answer your question.
Thank you. And I was just scrolling through the super chats. I try to group them, but Mimi here, Mimi, why do you think people like Tucker and Candace are truly anti-Trump? Do you think they're trying to destroy America? I hope this answered your question there. So thank you. Thank you very much, Mimi, for sending this in, and to Daisy Coca for expressing your concern. And thank you, Barbara, for your answer. I have another topic that I want to get to. I'm going to jump around here in the super chats a little bit. The next thing I want to get to is on the issue of the Catholic Church. So thank you, Kirk, for this question, and I'm going to take two here, which are a little bit more critical, but I think it'll be good because the topics are related here. Let me line this up here. Okay, Kirk says, any thoughts on the recent pronouncements from the Catholic Church, including the meeting between Pope Leo and Axelrod? And here I'm going to take two from our newsletter. How is the Pontiff Leo can ignore global genocide? Where are his ardent and frequent denunciations of the ongoing Muslim genocides against Christians in Nigeria or Syria? Where were his denunciations against what the regime in Iran was doing to its people? How is President Trump's disdain for his criticism going to harm the GOP in the midterms when these are truths? Thank you, Kevin. And here's another one from Anna. As a cradle Catholic, I have always considered both Pope Francis and Pope Leo to be deep state frauds. You're not alone. I actually know one other supporter who used to be much more involved in the Catholic Church. She's walked away recently for similar reasons too. There have been globalist plans put there to corrupt yet another institution. The ideology they spouted is not Catholic doctrine, but globalist doctrine. So what does a Catholic convert, J.D. Vance, think about this? He must be aware Pope Leo is not authentic. Will Vance say so? These are all very good and challenging questions, for sure. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this very important topic?
Well, I think the person who posted about the meeting with Axelrod was onto something. Look, you know, I'm a Catholic, but I walked away from the church essentially when you had the previous pontiff, you know, who seemed to be completely nuts in terms of fundamental Catholic doctrine. And that, I believe, is also going to be true of Pope Leo. I note that very prominently on Truth Social last week was a post about Pope John Paul, St. John Paul II. A huge difference in the Catholic Church. You know, I basically went back to church when John Paul II was actually the Pope, because everything he said and did in terms of Catholic social doctrine was exactly what I thought. And Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance and other people who are Catholics in the Trump administration are basically wedded to Catholic social doctrine, which promotes the idea that we are all creative human beings, that labor and productivity is to be honored because we are tasked in this life with perfecting God's creation. That, in a nutshell, is a big part of it. So, you know, going out and taking all the positions these two popes did seemed to me to be completely in contradiction to actual Catholic social doctrine. I note, and I can't pull it up right now, that I saw something yesterday from a Catholic bishop. It was posted prominently, I think, in the Wall Street Journal or somewhere else, arguing that this war, as opposed to what the Pope is saying, actually is representative of actual Catholic social doctrine in terms of a just war. The church is very split in the United States. There's all sorts of Catholics like me out there, you know, who basically, you know, practice our religion in critical events in life and hope for a better Pope. And I follow all sorts of people who I think represent that theological tendency. But, you know, I don't really make my religion part of my politics that much, except when somebody crosses the line, like meeting with David Axelrod to talk about the midterm elections. And that really does cross the line. So I think it's pretty clear what's going on here. I don't know what Chicago connectos actually are going back in time with the current Pope, David Axelrod and Barack Obama, but I strongly suspect that's a fertile ground for investigation. So that's what I have to say in answer to the question.
Yeah, I just add one thing. Recently, Marco Rubio did a short video. I think it was on the State Department website, but maybe it was just in the context of America 250, where he talks about the Catholic Church in America. And what I found very intriguing about that, first of all, he did reference Pope Leo, the earlier Pope Leo, who wrote from the 19th century, who praised the role of the United States as a singular nation, which is obviously very different from these two recent popes. But I thought the most important thing that he did is he basically said, he addressed it from the standpoint of the actual philosophical differences. And those differences are in the Catholic Church, they're in Protestant churches, they're in every single institution. He said the United States was not a product of the Enlightenment. And he said the United States was a product. Yeah, that's it. The United States was a product of a philosophical tradition which includes St. Augustine. Adams just put that up there. Yeah, people can find it by just looking for that. And I think that's really fundamental, because when people start to debate an institution and they say, the Catholic Church is this, the Episcopalian Church is this, Jewish religion is this. And same thing I would submit, and I know some of your hair is going to catch on fire. Muslim is this, where you're treating it as a noun, as a fixed, defined noun that's got some kind of emotional connection in your mind, good, bad, or whatever, as opposed to the fact that there are fights in all of these institutions over the fundamental questions. Denouncing the Enlightenment is extremely important, because the basic conception of man embedded in especially British and French Enlightenment philosophers is that you know the world through your senses, not through your mind, which basically puts you on the level of the beast. So, but is there an Enlightenment tradition in the Catholic Church, in Protestant churches, and as I say, in so many other institutions? Absolutely. And then is there the tradition of the real principles of Western civilization, which is that man is in the image of the Creator. And that's how you have to look at these things. Now, aside from the philosophical fights in these institutions, anybody who thinks that the oligarchy has not penetrated pretty much every institution and every church, and is not running factions and operations inside every institution and every church, isn't paying enough attention to the way the world really works right now. So, I really encourage people to not so much think in static terms. This is a thing, but look at each one of these as battlegrounds for ideas, where people are fighting. What I think is nice, it's more out in the open than you've seen it for a long time, so that maybe you have a fighting chance of figuring out who's who, what's what, where is this going, how does this operate.
Thank you, Susan and Barbara. Thank you, Kirk, for sending in the question. I hope we've answered your question. I think we have at least given you a good idea. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We're going to be doing a new political update in just a few days. I want to jump around here to this other super chat. So thank you, Josh, for joining us again. He has some comments about the midterm elections here. Hey, gang. The domestic fraud issue is a major winner for the midterms. If we can get past foreign policy, get gas prices way down, and show economic progress this summer, we should put the Dems on defense using fraud. Actually, and you know what? I have some questions here. Maybe we could take at the same time on this issue of gas prices, because the gas prices are still ridiculously high in other states, and that could also be a big thing on the midterms. So here's a few here. If the USA gets only 1% of oil from Iran, why are gasoline prices going up? I heard President Trump say we have plenty of gas and oil. I was wondering why the prices of gas stations are still going up. Thank you for all you are doing. And I have a third one here. I saw an overhead map this morning of the Gulf of America showing oil tankers filling up at Texas ports and then returning to their home countries. Looks like they don't need the Strait of Hormuz at all. Does this indicate that gas prices will drop in the U.S.? All right, so how did this issue of gas prices in some states, like here in Virginia, our gas price is almost $4. It was down at like $2.60, just a few weeks before the war started. Now it's almost up to $4. How does this going to affect the midterm elections?
Adam, I got the slideshow back. People saw this earlier. Look, this is why your gas prices are high, because of British manipulation. And how does that work? If you actually look at the breakdown of gasoline in terms of the price, now I know that's a lowball figure, $3.23 a gallon. But when this was generated, out of every $3 and a quarter, basically a gallon, over 60 cents of that is basically going to the empire. What you have is what's called the terror premium, to the extent that the Lloyds of London can constantly keep insurance rates jacked up because you never know what the Ayatollahs are going to do in the Strait of Hormuz. That's 42 cents of your gallon of gas. And then my favorite is the Brent futures market. And I'm not guaranteeing that these numbers are exactly right. I just asked AI and I didn't have a chance to check it because you can't really take that as
You got to check everything.
I know, but this is close. I mean, I'm not going to try and stand by every penny, but the concept is right. What is the question of the Brent futures market? The price of oil and gasoline is not set on the basis of how much production is out there. It's set by the British-run, City of London-run Brent crude futures market, which sets the price of oil by setting these futures prices. But here's the fun part about this. Those Brent crude futures never move a barrel of oil. It's just used as the pricing mechanism without having anything to do with the supply. So they say, oh, well, we think that, this war with Iran is going to go south. Therefore, we're going to continue to jack up the prices. Never mind the fact that, the tankers are coming to the United States, that we're producing oil and natural gas like we never have before. Our price at the pump is not determined by supply and demand, which I think is really hysterical because, the entire argument of the British liberal free trade system is that it's the market and supply and demand which is supposed to set your prices. And nothing could be further from the truth. This is a racket. This is a syndicate. And, to go back to the question about fraud, you want to talk about fraud? Yeah, of course, the people ripping off money in daycare centers and hospices in California, hundreds of millions, if billions of dollars and so on. When you're looking at the way the British Empire has run the world with their insurance fraud, their futures fraud, all the rest of this kind of stuff, that is the biggest racket in the world. And that is what I think the president intends to bust up.
But I want to go back to I agree with Susan, from the standpoint of comparative fraud. But I want to go back to the question about what the president and the White House have planned through J.D. Vance to actually go after the Democrats. And I think this is very, very important because what's being exposed here is a whole, let's call it the social welfare, mafia. Which is actually what it is. And what you have going on is criminal fraud in Medicare, Medicaid, and all of the social services entitlements, which make up a great deal of the federal budget. Huge fraud. COVID relief funds, huge fraud. Enough, really, they say, to actually potentially balance the budget. And really criminal fraud, this stuff in California with hospices. Think about that. Hospices, people actually ripping off the dying, to great profit. That's going to be quite an ad campaign. I can visualize it myself right now in terms of the visceral impact of actually showing what these people were doing. So Josh is absolutely right. This is an issue which ain't going away. And what you're going to discover is that a part of the reason why it flourishes in Minnesota, California, and in blue states is there's big, big kickbacks going to Democratic politicians. And that's what you're going to see coming out of these fraud investigations. So he's right. It is the issue which is upcoming. The president is clearly prioritizing it for the midterms. JD is in charge of it. There's a whole new division of the Justice Department, which is working it. And you're going to see, for this one, you are going to see a lot of people in cuffs.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Susan. Thank you to everyone who's been watching us. We've been about almost 5,000 strong the entire broadcast. Also, I have to give a quick shout out to all the people here who put in super chats. Our Shangri-La, David, sorry I didn't get a chance to get here. Fenderman, thank you for joining us here. Cat Black, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for all you do. Losing the midterms is not an option. Say that loud. Yes, it's not an option. Melody chimes in again. I think King Charles is in line with Starmer, but must look against him. Thank you, Melody, for joining us. Make sure you get in contact with me. Disastrophe says, maybe quick answer. I call my Senator Stoon a lot about the Save America Act. I also tell them to replace Stoon. Any comments? Love y'all. Thank you for joining us, Disastrophe.
Well, just so people know, at the end of next week, Promethean Action is sending a team of people to Washington, D.C. for an entire week. They've got scores of meetings set up, and they'll just be doing drop-ins, pretty much blanketing the entire Congress, both the House and the Senate. They will be delivering those messages too, in terms of the Save America Act and the Second American Revolution, which Donald Trump is carrying out.
Thank you, Disastrophe, and thank you to Riz Taylor. Thank you for making me smarter. Thank you for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed. Damon Swall, to keep up the good work. Thank you. We intend to. Thanks. Make sure you join us next Thursday. Stay subscribed to the channel. Got to Josh already. CWK Productions, looking forward. Hello, Mr. Carney. Yes. Well, keep on the lookout for that. It might take me a few weeks, but that's definitely a topic that we can investigate a little bit more. Thank you, PSH Junior 1. Folks, this is about making sure our children and grandchildren don't live in a world where China is the sole superpower. It's all about China.
Well, I'd say it's all about the imperial system. And with China, as with other institutions that we've talked about, it's not a monolith. And clearly President Trump is recognizing that his relationship with Xi Jinping is an important strategic pillar at this point in time. And I don't think we should discount that.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, brother, for joining us. Free newsletter subscription. Timur, thank you very much. It doesn't really matter how we vote in Canada if the prime minister isn't the king's preferred choice. That is true.
That is true. The king can do that in Canada, and he can do that in Australia. And they did it in Australia back in the 1960s.
Thank you. Backshift says, I wish Promethean Update people would reach out to Tucker's people, saying, we want to give you a history lesson, and you look at these monetary system facts over here that you don't know. Well, if they ever reach out to us, we'll make sure to tell them that. Thank you, Backshift, for joining us. Please make sure you're subscribed. Oliver says, I'm a millennial. Love you all, Barbara, Susan, and Adam. Thank you, Oliver, for joining us. Super enjoy having you be here. Stanley, always enjoy your briefing segments. Barbara and Susan, the best. Thank you. What are your thoughts on the democratic cities like New York City? They're pushing millionaires to red states for the purpose of diluting them. Well, I mean, California is doing that as an entire state. So many massive business people moved out of that state, took their operations there. Yeah, that's one of the worst things about the democratic states. It's hard to do business in them. So thank you very much. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Corey says, just want to show support. Thank you. Devana, thank you, Devana. Love your little puppy there. Love your doggo.
You see, I have my Corgi shirt on today, which I got on my birthday.
We're going to do a custom Corgi shirt design for Barbara, so you'll be able to buy it from our store. We're almost done here. Brad, what are your thoughts on Professor Zhang? Do you guys know who this guy is? He's a new black pillar on the scene.
No.
Professor Zhang. Okay, just remember that name, you guys, because he's one of these up and coming, like, radical. Then he's really targeting young people, right? So I know of Professor Zhang. It's the same kind of black pill garbage that a lot of other people are trying to sell. Of course, he comes at it from a much different angle because of his nationality, but it's the same essentially type of black pill and garbage. So Barbara and Susan, keep an eye on that name, Professor Zhang. because he is, I happened to, YouTube started pushing him to me, and then I saw him popping up on all these Telegram channels. So that's my thoughts. They'll take a look at it. And finally, thank you, Brian, for your $50 super chat. We really appreciate it. Barbara and Susan, any final remarks for our audience today?
Well, I'm going to highlight a chat I just saw from M. McLaughlin in New Hampshire. Just ordered 250 flyers for our group in New Hampshire, the Plymouth Patriots. Thank you all. Thank you. I hope everybody's still watching, gets active.
That's the answer. Get out there and act. That's what Trump is doing. Action, action, action. And we got to do the same to compliment him.
Thank you, everyone. And if you're interested in my Stay Creative Einstein Tribute t-shirt, I just threw that up on YouTube. There should be a link there. I know a lot of people have seen this one, but I haven't talked about it in a while. So if you want to check out my Einstein Tribute t-shirt, the link is in the should be displayed by YouTube. So thank you, everyone. We'll be back next Thursday. Make sure you're subscribed. Our next political update is coming on Saturday. And stay tuned to your email inbox. We'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.